All right, good evening and welcome everybody to the December 7th, 2022 Village of Woodbury Planning Board meeting. The Planning Board is holding this meeting because it is determined that the circumstances necessitating the emergency declarations by the governor for polio and monkeypox would affect or impair the ability of the public body to hold an in-person meeting. With that said, I ask that everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Hold on. There we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which is one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, has the board had a chance to look over the minutes from October 19th?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I'll offer a motion to accept the minutes from October 19th as provided.
Second.
Second by Michael. Any questions?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Sorry, just stopping some videos here. First item on the agenda, Orange County BMW review draft decision for amended site plan, special permit and architectural review board approval. Said property is located along Mayor Lane and Larkin Drive in Highland Mills and is known as the Village of Woodbury Tax Map, Section 225, Block 1, Lots 10.4.21 and 10.4.21-1. Okay, so the board had a chance to review the draft decision.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So after several pages of facts and findings, we get to the specific conditions. Sorry. This is what
The
happens when
last finding, just so you know, the last finding on page 4, we did receive confirmation from the water department and the village engineer that this application is permitted to proceed under the current moratorium.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. Specific condition number 1, all conditions of prior approval in connection with this property shall continue to be in full force and effect, and this resolution does not supersede or otherwise modify such prior approvals and conditions except as specifically set forth in this resolution. No building permit shall be issued authorized in the construction or renovations of structures inconsistent with the architectural rendering submitted to and approved by the Architectural Review Board as part of this approval. Nor shall any certificate of occupancy be issued for any structures constructed except in conformance with such renderings. Any deviation from such renderings will require further planning board review. Site lighting shall be designed in accordance with special permit conditions numbers 7 and 8 from the planning board approval dated February 19th, 2003. Number 4, prior to the signing of the plans of the chairman, by the chairman, the applicant shall comply with the memorandum of the village engineer dated October 27th, 2022 to the satisfaction of the village engineer. Any new windows or doors shall be constructed of non-reflective material. The electric vehicle charging stations are for the private use only and shall not appear on infrastructure mappings for public use. The applicant shall take appropriate steps to ensure these stations are not utilized by the general public. I'll offer a motion to accept the draft resolution approval as presented.
Second.
Second by Evan. Any questions?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda.
Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome. Have a good night, Sammy.
You do the same.
Item on the agenda, Hartman Leibowitz, 39 Catskill High Rail. Review draft decision for ARB and ridge preservation of proposed single-family dwelling located at lot number 19 within the village Woodbury Villas. Said property is located at 39 Catskill High Rail in Central Valley and is known to the village of Woodbury tax maps as section 254, block 1, lot 19. Again. So after several pages of facts and findings, we get to the specific conditions. Hold on 1 second. Okay. No building permit shall be issued authorizing construction of structures inconsistent with the architectural renderings submitted to and approved by the Architectural Review Board as part of this approval. Nor shall any certificate of occupancy be issued for any structures constructed except in conformance with such renderings. Any deviations from such renderings will require further planning board review. Okay. All new windows shall be constructed of or coated with non-reflective material. Anti-reflection window film will be applied to all new low E windows installed. Prior to the signing of the renderings, the applicant shall comply with the memorandum of the village engineer dated November 11, 2022, to the satisfaction of the village engineer. With that, I will offer a motion to accept the draft resolution of approval as presented. Second by Mr. Cottagio. Any questions?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Hartman. Talk to you soon.
Yep.
Next item on the agenda. Shlomo 50 Smith Clove Road, review and discuss revised documents submitted for proposed site plan, special permit, ARB, and water quality protection overlay for changes of use from a laundromat to apartments. Said property is located at 50 Smith Clove Road in Central Valley and is known as the Village of Woodbury Tax Maps, Section 213, Block 3, Lot 3. All right. Good evening, David.
Hello, Chris. Hello, board members. I really hate to break that pattern. I like the two resolutions for 1 and 2. You could continue that for this one also, it'd be great.
I was going to say this is where the wheels fall off, but
I was taking a positive spin on it. So, well, we're happy to be back before the board again on this project. We received Natalie's comments regarding the submission and the plans that we had provided for your review. Just as a brief summary, we did confirm that there are 2 existing apartments on the 2nd floor of this building. On the 1st floor, as you know, there exists 1 apartment, and the remaining portion of that 1st floor is a laundromat. The owner would like to convert that laundromat to another apartment. As a result, we reflected that in our plans. We did note Natalie's comments. There are quite a few pre-existing conditions that we would need variances for. In addition to that, we do realize that the bulk table needs to reflect the R-0.25 acre zone. So we'll amend the bulk table accordingly and reflect that on the plans. As she mentions on the last page, it should be referred to the ZBA because of those existing conditions. And I can't help but would agree that that would be the next step.
yes, we concur. But Natalie, you want to go over yours real quick and then we'll go to Phil?
Sure. I'll try to keep it brief because I think there are those threshold considerations associated with the variances that are required for this application. One of the things that we had asked for clarification on, David mentioned that there is a 2nd story to one of the buildings. So now we know that that also contains 2 residential dwelling units in addition to the 2 that are proposed. I think that's correct. Is that right, David, what you just said?
Yes.
So there's an existing single family home and then 4 residential dwelling units. So that changes a little bit of the relief that would be required for the lot area, but that can be reviewed with the ZBA at the appropriate time. The other nonconformities that we discuss are kind of related to, or mostly related to setbacks that are required, but, and again, in an existing condition based on, the applicant right now isn't proposing any changes to the site or the existing structures. There is, based on the survey, the property extends into the center of the County Route 9. So technically the code would require a land dedication in this instance. So we've asked you to review that with council and get their feedback on that issue. But we assume that the setbacks and the lot area would essentially be calculated with that deduction included. So with all that being said, I think there is an opportunity to refer this to the building inspector for an interpretation on some of the existing nonconformities, unless the applicant would choose to go right to the ZBA, but ultimately I think Kelly is probably going to advise on that. So I'll step back from those comments. We also had some comments on parking, and I know Phil's office weighed in on that issue as well. So there are some proposed nonconformities associated with parking, parking in the front yard setback, the distance from the entrance to the first off-street parking space, driveway widths, etc. The 2 parking stalls at the rear seem to be, in a location that it would be difficult to access or back out of. And also we've recommended that there be some consideration of the bank edge where the parking stalls are proposed in that area, whether or not it's stable, and also suggesting a guardrail or some other mechanism, if ultimately that is approved as proposed. Also, we noted that according to Google Earth, there was a dumpster shown where the parking is proposed. So if that's going to be relocated, then you should know where it is on the plan, and whether or not that's going to be sufficient for all the uses that are proposed. We talked about the water quality protection overlay district at the applicant's last appearance. Our review of the code found, because there's no site disturbance or disturbance to the existing structures, that there may not necessarily be any further review other than your typical special permit review that you're considering right now. But we'll defer to Kelly on that. And then same on the floodplains and the wetland considerations. Since there's no site disturbance, I don't think that there's any additional review or approvals required in that regard, as the plan is today. And then other than that, we provided some comments on the EAF that the applicant provided for you to consider under your next steps associated with seeker. And otherwise, that's it.
Thank you, Natalie. Anybody have questions for Natalie?
I do. Is Phil's comments incorporated in H2M's letters, or is there a separate list of comments from Phil?
There's David, there's a separate list. There's just 3 items. They're pretty straightforward. I'll go over them. The one is really just relative. You already answered the first question, which was we weren't sure how many total apartments there were.
Okay.
That wasn't clear, so you've answered that. The second one is relative to the access driveway. I know it's an existing condition, but to show what the site distances are, understanding that the building is where it is, but looking back towards the creek and looking to the west, we'd like to know what the site distance is and if there's anything that can be done to improve it, pruning of vegetation or anything else. So we'd like to see what those are and how they compare to the site distance standards for that roadway. And the last comment was really relative to the ability to get in and out of the parking spaces and the proximity of the driveway to the county highway. So kind of the same comment as Natalie had. And that's it. Those were the 3 comments.
Thanks.
Any Anybody have questions for Phil?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
How does this coordinate with the proposed townhouses off of Falkirk, which comes into the same vicinity?
So in terms of the Falkirk project is doing a traffic analysis of the, I'm sorry, Mike, yes. So the Falkirk project, the townhouse project, is in the process of doing some traffic analysis. They're looking at the intersection of Falkirk and Smith Clove Road, so that documents that. The issue of site distances are the same issues, that we're talking about here. They are going to look at that also, and they are aware, and they're going to include in that evaluation of the intersection, the traffic from these dwelling units. So on this particular project, I think it's really, does the parking work? Does the layout of the parking without impacting the county highway? And then, as I said, the evaluation that's being done by, I think it's Creighton Manning is doing the analysis for the townhouse project, and they're going to include this traffic.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to jump in really quick on some of the items that Natalie said. So a couple of times it talks about the property continuing to the talks about the property continuing to the center line of the street. So although the property's description includes the land to the middle of the road, at this point, the county does own the road. So for purposes of setbacks, that should be considered. But generally, we like to have that property, cleaned up, but that's an issue with the county. I did want to point out that the county DPW asked for additional information. So David, if you haven't received that, let me know. And if you have, let me know. Okay, I'll send you that. And then lastly, it does require several area variances or determinations by the building inspector. So we'll work with Natalie and Mike on that.
Okay, give me 1 second. Just have to remove some people. Okay. I apologize for the interruptions. Does anybody from the board have any questions for Kelly? Oh,
No, I'm good.
okay. All right, so I'll offer a motion to refer the app. Whoops, sorry, David.
So just to be clear, we're going to wait for correspondence from the building department as a coordinated effort between Kelly, Natalie, and the building inspector for some decisions, and then we'll be referred to the ZBA.
Yeah, it's gonna be referred. If any of those don't require variances, then the building inspector will note that and we'll let you know.
Okay, sure.
This way you don't have to come back for the referral when that's taking place. So once those determinations are made, then you can go ahead over to the ZBA.
We appreciate it. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll offer a motion to refer the application to the ZBA once the needed variances are flushed out. You seconding, Michael, or your question? Okay, second by Michael. Any questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much, David. We'll see you when you're back from the ZBA.
Okay, have a good evening, everyone, and happy holiday season coming up in a few weeks.
You too, sir. Take care. Next item on the agenda is Homewood Suites, is a public scoping session for a proposed 97-room hotel, including amenities such as an indoor pool, small meeting room, exercise, limited dining lobby / lounge, and/or outdoor courtyard on the 3 parcels with a combined acreage of 3.23 plus or minus acres, known as the Section 226 Block 1, Lot 6.1, 7, and 8 on the village tax maps. The property is located on the limited commercial district and within the hotel overlay district. Before we get started with this tonight, and before we go out to the public, I kind of just want to set a little bit of expectations here. This is not like a normal public hearing where people come down and voice their concerns for or against a project. That public hearing will take place at a later date during the site plan review process. This public hearing is required by New York State under the Department of Environmental Conservation secret guidelines. This is taking place because this board has offered a positive declaration, meaning that there may be some minor to major environmental impacts with this project that we're here to discuss tonight. The state requires this to be a very focused scoping session. They set out 6 guidelines for this. It's to focus the draft EIS on the potential significant adverse environmental impacts. eliminate non-significant and non-relevant issues, identify the extent and quality of information needed, identify the range of reasonable alternatives to be discussed, provide an initial identification of migration measures, and provide the public with an opportunity to participate in the identification of impacts. And then when they refer to impacts, those are strictly environmental impacts with this project. I summed that up pretty good, right, Kelly? Cool. So this public hearing was noticed in the paper of record as required by state law. We did also receive back a comment from the Orange County Department of Planning, which I'll read in, so it's part of the record tonight. The Department of Planning has received notice in the Village of Woodbury of the positive declaration issued for the above project in accordance with New York State Environmental Quality Review Act. We appreciate the opportunity to review the draft and final environmental impact statements to be prepared for this project, as well as any additional secret information, and we appreciate information provided by the village. We concur with the village's findings that the proposed project may potentially pose adverse impacts to the environment. Our previous review of this project raised concerns regarding traffic, sidewalks, lighting, and landscaping as part of the DEIS. We advised the village to require a full traffic impact analysis for this project, including cumulative impacts to the Route 32 corridor. There has been a planner assigned to this in the Orange County Office of Planning, and they look forward to further input that we send to them. Kelly, do you want to kick it off, or should we just start with Natalie and Phil?
I guess I'll just give a very brief summary. I think you summarized everything wonderfully, and the purpose of the public scoping session and the requirements under state law. So as the board remembers, a positive declaration was issued, which was based upon the FEAF Part 2, which was based upon the FEAF Part 1. So this is to be a limited scope EIS. This is not an opportunity for it to be, full blown. It really does need to be tailored to those issues that you've identified as being small, moderate, or large, potentially. So what we provided to you was a redline scoping document. A copy has actually also been provided to the applicant to review prior to tonight. It incorporates suggestions made by Natalie, by Phil, and by myself. There is one area, Chris, do you mind if I just jump to cultural resources?
Yeah, might as well get the easy one out of the way.
So there was a potential impact that was identified in the FEAF Part 2, because correspondence hadn't yet been received from the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation regarding any impacts on cultural resources. A letter has since come in from that department stating that they don't see any impacts to those resources. So it would be my recommendation that that section come out of the scoping document, because now no potential impacts have been identified. And with that, as brief as an attorney can be, I will turn it back over to you.
Okay. Kelly, do we need to vote on having that section removed, or can we just take it out?
Well,
Because
I would recommend taking it out, but if the board disagrees, certainly let me know. We'd like to try and have a final version for you for adoption at your next meeting. So I would be preparing that revised version, and I would be taking it out. But again, if the board disagrees, please let me know and we can talk about it.
does anybody have any objections to removing that section? Hold on. You're muted, Mike.
I'm good.
Okay, I am as well.
I defer to her judgment.
Okay.
No exception.
Okay. Whew. All right, we got that. We got the easy one out of the way. Gonna tee up, Natalie.
Mr. Chairman, may
Yeah.
I be heard for a second, please?
Sure. Go. Is that Mr.
This is-
Frank?
Yeah, it's
Okay, there
Will
you
Frank.
are. Yep.
It's
Go ahead.
Will Frank. I'm sorry, I'm in my car. Good evening, everyone. Real quick, I'm Will Frank. I am the one of the attorneys for the project, and we have Steve Esposito with us and others who will address some of the red lines that were proposed by the village's consultants. First of all, just want to say thanks for moving forward with this quickly. We do appreciate it. We know that you guys are really busy, and you've scheduled the scoping session this evening and have it up for vote within the time frames required under seeker. Before I stop talking. And Kelly said everything really beautifully. We appreciate you taking out the cultural section. And we just want to affirm that we agree that when it was POSDEC, this project, we discussed having a very narrow focus when it's possible to have the narrow focus and be able to address some of the issues that were raised, particularly in light of the fact that the project is within the hotel overlay zone, which was created for such projects. So having said that, I want to say thank you, and you guys will continue with the meeting. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Steve, anything you want to add before we keep going? No? Okay.
Congratulations on your merger, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Steve, are you gonna address your comments after we hear from Natalie and the other folks in the village?
Yeah, I think let the consultants go first, and then if we'll kind of wrap it up.
Great, thank you.
All right, Natalie, torches to you.
Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to kind of discuss with the board before I get into our comments. I mean, the best way to kind of go about this, I know that the board did receive the redlined copy containing our comments, Phil's comments and Kelly's comments. I did prepare a memo that kind of highlighted the substantial modifications that we made to the document, and even the minor, really. So do you want me to just kind of go through the memo quickly, bullet by bullet, or what's the best way you think would you prefer us to go through this?
I think let's go through bullet. I mean, I did read the red line document you sent over, and I'm in agreement with almost most of what you put in there. So let's just do the memo, and that we'll do the highlights. We'll go from there.
Just on the cover sheet, we had some minor changes. We added some information on the applicant, and there is some information, the phone and email for Bilal that should be added, or Mr. Ahmed. We also noted that there is a reference to formerly known as Rainbow Group of Central Valley Inc., but I think that still is the current applicant. But if not, then a new application should be filed with the planning board. So just wanted to kind of figure that notation out. We had some minor changes to wording in the introduction and the brief project description. With respect to the involved agencies and approvals, we added the village board and the right-of-way dedication and indicated to be determined for completeness. We also combined the state approvals under the New York State heading, so that's minor. We updated the language and the basis for the POSDEC to match the POSDEC and Part 2 EAF reviewed by the board. We updated the section to reflect the section on scoping to reflect the recent actions soliciting public input. We added a reference to the seeker regs and required organization of the scoping document. The organization of the DEIS. We had minor modifications to the suggested content of the cover and table of contents, and then kind of moving into the actual content of the DEIS. In chapter 1, we recommended edits to the content of the executive summary to include a discussion on the history of the seeker process. We suggested a table versus a list of approvals required, just to kind of make that more concise and digestible by the board, similar to how it is in the scoping document now. We asked for a discussion on unavoidable adverse impacts and irretrievable commitment of resources, and suggested a chart comparing project alternatives and impacts. For the project description, we asked for or suggested edits to include the discussion on the rights of way, the utilities, consideration for ESOs, discussion on the proposed use and daily operations of the site, including amenities and special events, as well as proposed restrictions, project review and approval sequences. And we requested a section on the project need and benefit with the existing conditions, in chapter 3, potential impacts and proposed mitigation measures for each identified potential impact. We had various comments on each of those. So with land use, zoning, and public policy, we rearranged the content from existing conditions to potential impacts, requested a discussion on the impacts and benefits of proposed easements, modifications to rights of way, discussion on cumulative impacts, including proposed and recently approved developments within a half mile of the site, With respect to geology and soils, we requested some additional information on rock outcropping, slopes analysis, soil limitations, and structural characteristics in the existing condition. We requested a discussion on impacts that could occur to steep slope disturbance, although I think there's relatively little, so it'll probably be brief. High water table, given the proximity to the wetlands and other surface water features on the site, whether or not blasting is going to be required, and a consideration of a cut fill. In consideration of a cut fill, we asked for anticipated truck trips and routes for deposition and disposal. With respect to wetlands and surface water features, we requested a discussion on the interconnection between the on-site water features and principal aquifer, and also validation of mapping by jurisdictional agencies. Let's see. We requested a discussion on floodplains and disturbance of the same. For vegetation and wildlife, we requested a report in the appendix evaluating the presence of protected, endangered, threatened, and rare species and habitats on the project site. And right now the site is flagged for northern long-eared bat, so that would essentially be associated with that issue or that species. With respect to stormwater management, we rearranged some of the language that the applicant had proposed. So the existing conditions reflected the pre-development considerations, and then the impacts reflected the post-development conditions. We bolstered the recommendation section on mitigation measures, including requirement for a SWIP, consideration of the village's MS4 code, requirements including DEC permitting requirements, and erosion and sediment control plan. For visual resources and community character, we added language that was reviewed as part of the part 2 to consider the visibility and vantage points for routine travel by residents and tourism considerations. We requested architectural plans and renderings and a discussion on lighting, as well as a lighting plan be included in this part of this EIS. We deferred to Phil's comments on traffic and transportation. With respect to infrastructure and utilities, we requested a discussion on the water, sewer, electric, gas, and solid waste services separate from one another. We requested graphical trends for water and sewer for the village over the last 10 years using reports by OCSD and the annual water quality reports that are issued by the village. And that'll give you guys essentially a trend of, what the, capacity of those systems or the usage towards those systems are. And then also we asked for the applicant to provide a tabulation of approved and unbuilt projects for which water and sewer capacity has been allocated, so that you can consider the available capacity to meet the needs of this project. We requested a section on potential impacts, including average and peak calculations for water and sewer, including assumptions and reference to technical resources that they've used to develop the estimates. And we requested a projection of usage at the project build year for a comparison of impacts at that time. We also requested a discussion on and off-site improvements that may be required. Cultural resources is going to be struck, so I won't talk about that. Noise, we added a section on noise. I think that was one of the potential impacts identified in your part 2 and your pause deck. So we requested a consideration of the existing conditions, potential impacts, and mitigation measures. And then with respect to construction sequencing, this is chapter 4. We added a discussion on the existing conditions of the roadway and surrounding area that could be impacted by the construction. For potential impacts, we requested a discussion and map on construction phasing, remedial measures to prevent or correct damage to roadways during construction, or offsite improvements that would be necessary to facilitate construction. Estimate of truck trips, speed restrictions, if any, protecting wetlands and other surface waters, as well as sensitive considerations for, seasonal considerations for sensitive species and staging areas. Under alternatives, we requested a discussion on the alternative layouts for a project site, alternative uses for the project site, as well as a reduced scale alternative. For unavoidable adverse impacts, we suggested a discussion on temporary construction impacts and impacts to natural site features, as well as operational impacts. And then the rest, I think it was minor changes to wording on project impacts and energy use. We had no changes on chapter 8 for irreversible and irretrievable commitment of resources. And for chapter 9, we actually added a section on growth inducing aspects of the proposed action. And essentially that would consider secondary impacts of the development that could trigger additional development in the area that would not otherwise happen without the proposed project. For example, the traffic improvements that are proposed, and also the consistency with surrounding land uses. And then we asked for minor changes to wording in the technical appendices as well as the geotech data reports and information that were requested above. So I just went into that whole memo. That was it. Sorry, everybody.
No, Natalie, it's, I have to say, thank you very much. You've taken a lot of the notes from the multiple meetings that we've had on this project and the forms it's been in and the concerns this board has had through the review process so far and have very nicely detailed and expanded on those for us. So thank you for your work. I know this is not a fun or an easy task to go through.
It's what we do. It's no problem.
So does the board have questions for Natalie? Okay. Mr. Greeley?
So we did not prepare a memo. We included our red line suggested modifications to section 7, which is the traffic and transportation section of the scoping document. There are 3 pages of items that are covered there. The scope was, pretty standard in terms of looking at existing and future conditions and cumulative impacts from traffic and several other details. One of the items that we had, as you know, there was fairly extensive traffic work done previously, and there was a traffic study prepared. One item that we recommended because of the age of some of the data is to perform some updated traffic counts just to make sure. Some of it was collected during COVID, and we'd like to make sure that that gets done so we have a accurate existing conditions base. In terms of some of the previous conversations we've had on this area, the whole corridor actually, the applicant had done previously various capacity analyses that they were submitting to the state DOT, which they will require a permit from. And we've asked them to provide a simulation of existing conditions and also the future conditions. So basically, they already have developed a model of the intersections. Once they verify the existing conditions with the new traffic counts, they can then show simulations. I think that was something the board wanted to see, and the effect of their additional traffic and the effect of the mitigation that they've already identified. The list of other developments that they need to include should be updated to just, make sure that it covers any projects that are in front of the planning board that affect traffic in this area. And some other details. They've developed some improvement plans, but to clearly show on those plans, not only the existing right-of-ways, but the location of other existing driveways, both on the opposite side of Route 32, as well as on the opposite side of Turner Road, where they are creating their access and their improvements. And we will, of course, require input from New York State DOT. And under the alternatives section, when they prepare the alternatives, we'd like to see some traffic numbers for those alternatives also. And that's pretty much what we've added to the scope.
So Phil, I have a question for you, and it's my page 21. A new traffic count should be conducted during the PM and Saturday peak hours at the intersection of New York State Route 32 and Turner Drive. Should we specify what peak hours we want that done?
Yeah, so in the previous section, they identify, for example,
I think it's the 4 to 6.
4 to 6 on the weekday and 11 to 2 on the weekend, I think is what they show.
So I have a suggestion based on just when the schools and stuff get out. If we can bump that from 4 to 3 and from 6 to 7, based on just the traffic on 32 people's commutes,
Yeah.
or people commuting later in the day now.
Right. And you also need to note that it's the northern intersection of Turner, because Turner comes out again a little bit south by Cosmos.
Correct. Yeah, that's right, Michael. It should just refer to north. It's the location that they had previously studied, but yes.
Right.
You can add
And
that.
at one point, there was talk about talking to DOT about adding a turn lane in there.
Yes, so under the mitigation section, they have outlined, some possible mitigation. They prepared preliminary plans showing the left turn lane. And would be part of their mitigation section to, they have to update that plan to show the other driveways that we requested and to incorporate the land dedication that's required relative to those improvements.
And are sidewalks and crosswalks included?
The plan does not have a sidewalk. One of the comments that we had previously made on their plan submission was to look at that in relationship to the other driveways. So I think we could include a reference to our previous comments, which was the last memo that we had prepared relative to their plan, because they had submitted a plan. They had gotten conceptual approval from DOT, but we had several comments, including comments about the location and ability to provide sidewalks, the driveway locations, and an exact determination of what land was going to be dedicated to the state of New York. And their revised plan had eliminated any dedication requirements with the village, but that has to be, spelled out.
And there was also some talk about relocating Turner to south of SMA. But I think that was when they were talking about Beer World, which has disappeared.
Correct.
Phil, do you know off the top of your head, when they did the 1732-6 improvements, did the DOT install any of the permanent traffic counters in that corridor?
So what they did, the signals that went in are supposed to be able to provide traffic data. And I guess we could, as a village, request that information. They've been working to try to make that available, but there were some questions about the rights of accessing the data. There's a software that's used that they summarize the data, and as of 2 months ago, it wasn't available from the state. But we can make that request on behalf of the village to make it available.
It would give us a real-time feel
Yeah.
of what's going on there. Since
As part of the adaptive signals that they put in, they have the ability to collect that data. But again, I think it was something to do with the software license, whether or not they could get provided to the public. So I think the state was working on trying to resolve that.
Understood. Okay. Does anybody from the board have any other questions or feedback for Phil?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rich.
It's my understanding what you said, that the applicant traffic consultant agreed to do a digital simulation. correct?
We've added that to the scope. It wasn't in the original scope. We've asked that to be presented as part of the DEIS to have the simulation available, correct?
Okay, and does that include pending applications within a half a mile of this? Is it Turner Road? Where's that half a mile measured from?
So we did not limit it to a certain distance, because from a traffic standpoint, for example, the the project down in Harriman Gardens is going to add traffic to Route 32. So we've asked as part of this scope to include background traffic, not only within a half mile, but anything that influences this corridor. And that would be part of what we refer to as the no build condition in the draft scope.
So, could we make a list of the various applications, names, so he has that up front before we do the simulation?
Yes, yes,
Just so we're in agreement, because there's quite a few applications.
absolutely.
Thank you.
And since you're doing all of this traffic work, the revitalization committee in Woodbury is looking at the turning off of Buena Vista. They want the little island there, they want to improve it, but they don't want it to be any kind of impact on traffic. So while you're doing the site plans, can you just add that in or no?
No, it doesn't pertain to this.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board for traffic? Kelly, you have anything to add before I open up to the public?
No, I tried to take some notes for what Phil was saying for recommended revisions, but I think he and I are gonna have to touch base because some of that traffic stuff just goes right over me on where he wants the changes. So
Yeah,
I'll touch base with
Kelly,
him
they're
after.
already in the red line document.
Oh, yeah, I put them in, but then Chris asked, so I changed the
Oh,
weekdays
yes,
from 3 to 6. So
times, yes,
I'll coordinate with you, make sure that this is what
absolutely.
was discussed, but I know there's
So-
gonna be other comments from the board and from the applicants, so when we compile a last one, me, you and Natalie will get on the same page.
Don't worry, we have the most excellent scribe in the village of Woodbury. So she takes great notes. So she'll have everything there for us as well.
Thanks, Claudia.
All right. So with that, I'm going to open up the meeting to the public for input on the draft environmental impact statement. I ask that again, everybody please abide by the rules that I laid out before the meeting started. Being we are virtual, it is a little hard to do public hearings. So what's going to happen is you're going to have to unmute yourself. I guess give it a second, make sure no one talks on top of each other, state your name, where you're from, and then give your feedback or input to the board.
How you doing? Doug Grimes. I own the residential property just north of the project. Based on your comments, I'm not going to go through any of my concerns at this meeting. I'm just curious, I have a question. You mentioned that there would be another public hearing. Do you know who is hosting that and what date that would be?
The public hearing will be hosted by the planning board. You'll be noticed because you're within the 300-foot radius of the project. We don't have a date for it yet because right now, once we get through this process, this has to come back to the board, get resubmitted to the board and reviewed. And then when we feel the application is in a sufficient enough process or place where most of the major changes have been made and the site plan is in a pretty steady state, the public hearing will be noticed. And then the public hearing will be held for everybody to come down and state their comments and concerns on the overall site and project. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have some major concerns with, I mean, I've seen the project or the plans on the village website, right? And I have some major concerns with that. I don't want to get to a point where we're very late in the process and a lot of things have been approved before I can provide comment.
Well, nothing is approved until if you were here early in the meeting, those resolutions of approval that were read off. So nothing is approved on until those resolutions are worked on. So it's not going to be just one more meeting. There's going to be several more meetings, several more reviews prior to anything being put up for approval. And before any approval is given, that public hearing has to happen. So you'll have your chance to weigh in on your concerns and comments about the project before any approvals are received by the applicant.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Robin Kraus.
Yep, go ahead, Rob.
I actually need your help tonight. The public hearing notice stated that the scoping document can be found on the Village Woodbury's website. And I went on and it was nowhere to be found. I was unable to get to the building department in person as I'm recovering from surgery, which is my problem, not yours, I understand. But I'm respectfully asking that the board accept 10-day written comment period after, before you close the scoping session, public hearing altogether. Or
Yep,
if you
no
do,
problem.
then just
Had-
extend the time frame.
Had every intention to allowing written comment for another week. You,
Okay.
just keep in mind, Robin, we are under, as you know, with the process under some time constraints, so.
Oh, yes, I totally understand. I certainly within a reasonable time. Totally understand. I'm hoping for 10 days, not 5, but that's okay, whatever the board decides. I appreciate it.
Yep, no, we'll make that before we close, not close this public hearing, but before we end tonight, we'll set the date for written public comment.
Right. The only other thought I have, Kelly, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. No.
Go ahead, you
Um,
finish and then I'll tell you how to get to it on the website.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the cultural resources being taken out of the scoping document, I was a little disappointed actually, but I understand the comments from Shippo. But I hope the board doesn't lose sight of the fact that Turner Farm is of local significance. So I wouldn't want to see that impacted too much, quite frankly. So anyway, that's it for tonight. Thank you very much.
Before you go, I just want to give you just a little bit of directions on the website. I think part of the reason is because the name is Homewood Suites, but it used to
Right.
be Rainbow Group.
Right?
So if you go to the document center and the planning board meeting documents, it's almost near the bottom of that page and it's Rainbow/Homewood Suites. And then if you go to the second page for this project, it's the second one from the bottom. It says scoping document Homewood Suites. And if you have any problems finding it, Robin, just send me an email and I can email it to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And Robin, hope you recover.
Yeah,
Me
feel better.
too. Thank you.
And Robin, if it helps you, I just sent you the link in the chat window.
Oh,
that will
okay,
take-
yep.
That will take you to the page that has the document on it.
Okay, got it. Thank you again.
You're welcome, Robin. Next up, go ahead. This is the only thing weird about virtual public. You can't kind of like look out into the crowd and see if anybody's like edging on the seat to get up or not.
It's like the awkward silence. Did I freeze or no? Okay.
Yeah, I see people's head moving. Next, second call for public comment input on the draft EIS for Homewood Suites.
Draft scoping document.
Draft scoping document, sorry, thank you. That's gonna cost me money.
At least 25 cents.
Yeah. Third call for the draft scoping document, public input. Go ahead, Mr. Clore. Can't hear you.
You're
You're
muted,
muted.
Brandon.
No, he's not muted. He has no,
No, I don't hear his audio.
yeah.
Brandon,
Mr.
maybe you
Clore.
should sign out and sign in again.
And we can't hear you, Mr. Clore.
Colore.
Hello.
Mike, stick with me. I butcher everybody's name.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Yes.
Oh,
Got it
There you
right.
go. There you go.
Okay, I had to do a test speaker there. Please forgive my, greenness on when it comes to the situation. I just want to make sure what we're talking about here. This is the area surrounding the Success Martial Arts area. Is that correct?
Yes,
In the vicinity, that's
in the
surrounding.
vicinity, it's behind and
Okay,
behind
so
it and to the side.
I know like a little bit about this project that's going on. I'm getting my education on it. I had a lot of concern from residents from Oakland Avenue about the congested traffic over there. What is the plan as far as that? Will there be a traffic light installed over there, allowing them to get out? Will they have to venture through the back roads? I just wanted to make sure, because that's a very close road to the project that you guys are talking about. And I do talk to a lot of people on Oakland, and I just wanted to make sure that their interests are also being heard, please.
Phil, can I punt you on that one?
Please.
So in the scoping document, one of the intersections that they're evaluating is Route 32 and Oakland Avenue.
Okay.
In addition, there are two hotel projects that are proposed. The one that had a scenario that came out with an access opposite Oakland is not this project. This project is located on I'll call it the northeast side of where Turner Road intersects with Route 32. However, this scoping document requires this applicant to consider the traffic from that project as well as others, and it will evaluate Route 32 and Oakland Avenue.
Okay.
In the past, there were discussions about possible signalization of that intersection. That is subject to New York State DOT, who will be interested in an involved agency as part of permitting. So at this point right now, there is not a proposal for signalization. However, that will be the outcome of the analysis and the review by us and the DOT as to what mitigation measures will be put in place. Right now, their proposal is to widen Route 32 and realign Turner Road to create a separate left turn lane for traffic heading southbound on Route 32. So
Okay.
if you're heading south on 32 and you were going to this new hotel location, turning onto Turner Road, there would be a separate left turn lane at that location. That's their current proposal. We have in the past asked DOT about signalization in this corridor, but that was prior to this comprehensive study that's going to be incorporated into this environmental impact statement. And as a result of that, we'll determine if there will be signalization and what other mitigation will be required.
Okay, thank you. So I guess the long and short of it is to stay tuned. Is that correct?
That's the purpose of this document, is to
Okay.
come up with a series of mitigation measures, present that at a public hearing to the public. And then there'll be other comments from the public and from different agencies. And not to steal Kelly's description, but the next thing would be a final environmental impact study responding to any detailed comments that come out of the public hearing on the draft environmental impact statement.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that the residents in those areas off of 32, were spoken for. So thank you very much for that.
But I'll summarize the summary. This board does not have the legal authority to require a traffic light on Route 32. That is the purview of the state DOT. So all we can do is give them the evidence and saying that a traffic light should be required there. But at the end of the day, if the DOT says, no, we're not putting a traffic light there, we really can't, there's nothing this board can do about it. Just to set expectations at the right level here.
Right.
No, I understand that, and I appreciate it. I just want to make sure that everything is mentioned. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate that.
You're
And
welcome.
It's also up to the village to request changes in speed limits.
I think they did that quite a while ago.
Yeah, it's still in the DOT's folders.
Good luck. I used to work for them.
Any other people wishing to speak on the draft EIS for Homewood Suites?
Scoping document.
Scoping
Why do
document,
I
Mr.
keep doing
Chairman.
Scoping document. I don't know why I keep doing that.
Yep,
You're just seeing if Will and I are awake. I think that's what it is. We are.
we
Well,
are.
Will made it home, so that's a good thing. We see he's no longer in his car.
I gotta go back out later, but for now I'm home.
All right, so I know we are under some time constraints, so if we accepted public comment to the 14th, Kelly, would that give us enough time to get it all together for the 21st?
Yes, I think so. I would just coordinate with Claudia to start in her office, just to make sure, and Maria, to make sure that everything that is received, I will distribute those to the board as well, so that everybody gets everything. And then make changes, recommendations, and send that to the board after I consult with Natalie and Phil. And what we normally do as well is also send a version to the applicant so they know what's being discussed.
So then with that, I'll offer a motion that any written correspondence on the draft scoping document for Homewood Suites has to be received in the building department by 3 p.m. on December 14th. That gives an hour for that to be transmitted over to your offices for review. Okay? I get a second? Second by
Thanks.
Michael. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman,
Make sure, I thought you voted. I was like, wow, Will just voted on one of our motions. too.
listen, and if you want me to vote, I will, but just to add to that, you'll also accept any comments from the applicant side with respect to the proposed changes to the scoping document?
Only if it's in .14 font, Arial. Yeah, of course.
We could do that. We can make it bigger if you want. We could do it in crayon, whatever. We just want to have an opportunity as well. We appreciate the additions that the professionals made, but we do potentially have a few comments just to understanding that certain things have to be studied, but we may have a few comments on some things that may possibly be narrowed a little bit.
No, absolutely, and understood. You, again, get it in by the 14th at 3 o'clock so that it can all be combined together and we can make the required deadline.
We will work on that and make sure that any comments are received hopefully before that time.
Okay. All right, Steve?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve,
I don't
did
think
you-
I've ever heard you.
Steve,
I don't think
No, I just said, Will actually took the words right out of my mouth. So, because we only had this for a day or two, so we'd like to be able to go through it and respond accordingly.
Come on, Steve. You had nothing to do today.
That's right.
So nothing else, I guess, from your team then, Steve or Will, right? We'll wait for your written comment. We'll wait for your written feedback.
Yeah, well, there's some items we'd like to get some clarifications on. And then, as Will said, maybe we can narrow a few things down. But all in all, a lot of it was standard stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, that went a lot smoother than I thought it was going to. Go ahead, Kelly.
You just need a motion to close the public scoping session.
No, don't we leave it open because because we're accepting written comment, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll offer a motion to close the public scoping session, of course, parlaying onto the other motion to accept written comment until the date that we approved.
Second.
Evan, any questions?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Take
All
care.
right. Last but certainly not least, local law number 10 of 2022 event venues, referral of local law number 10 from the Village Board of Trustees, amending chapter 310 zoning of the code of the Village of Woodbury to allow event venues as special permit use. We're going to start differently. Kelly, you're going to kick this one off for us tonight.
Okay, so the Board of Trustees authorized me to draft a local law that would permit event venues in, under certain circumstances. It was required to be referred to this board, obviously, under the zoning code as it stands. What the local law generally says is it defines what an event venue is. It's permitted on a minimum lot size of 25 contiguous acre. It would be, I say would be, obviously the law's not approved. And the board hasn't held its public hearing on it yet either, so they're waiting for your input. So it would be permitted on a minimum lot size of 25 contiguous acres. It would be permitted in the R1A district, but not within any senior housing overlay that covers any portion of the R1A district. There needs to be 2 means of ingress and egress. The events are limited to 199 attendees, which includes employees or staff serving the event. And
I guess go to that meeting.
you might want to mute that.
Yeah, I
one.
am.
Okay. And if once it exceeds that, it does become, it does fall into your public assembly law, which is 200 people. So this is under the public assembly law. There is parking requirements, hours of operation requirements, food service, buffers, seating. It's heavy on needing planning board review and planning board approval, as well as fire department and building code, just to make sure that everything is up to par and safe for all of the attendees. Importantly, this is a special use, so it would be permitted by special use permit with site plan review as well. And it's limited in that in the event a property is either sold or otherwise transferred, the special permit becomes null and void. It has to be restored to its original status, and anything that was additionally constructed making an event venue would need to be removed. This is actually very similar to the provisions you have in your code right now for mother-daughters. Although they aren't called mother-daughters, they're called like temporary accessory dwelling in a dwelling or something like that. But so that's an important part of this local law. And it also regulates exterior lighting and sets forth what the minimum bulk requirements would be with an amendment to the R1A table. So I know that there's going to be a lot of comments on it, so happy to jot them down and send them on to the Board of Trustees.
Okay,
And-
so go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. This was based on the Rushmore experience.
Yes, it stemmed from that, but this
Right.
is not just, this doesn't only permit event venues on the Rushmore property.
No, it would have to be not just a specific location, it would be more
Right.
general. And one of the main concerns there was the ESO.
Yes, and so that was addressed in here by saying that it needs at least 2 forms of ingress and egress, which shall be adequate for emergency vehicles, which is determined by this board in consultation with the emergency responders. But if the planning board, so you could require additional construction of improvements of those to make sure that that's okay. But you could also review an application and determine that 2 access points is not needed and only 1 is. That's really where you get some wiggle room on access. And we all know different sites where 2 means of ingress and egress are needed, and then others where, you know, maybe 2 aren't because it's right adjacent to the road or something like that. So it really gives the board discretion in that respect.
Thank you.
So I know Natalie and Phil have a bunch of comments. I have a bunch as well, Kelly, including that I would like the law to specifically reference the New York State Fire Chapter Code 31, and it deals with temporary tents and parties taking it requires the means of egress, number of exits, aisle arrangements, exit signs, requirements for smoking, exposed flame, fireworks. So that I would like that to see that specifically referenced in the law, that any tent or / canopy must comply with that section of the New York State Fire Code and needs to be inspected prior to the event taking place. As well as us defining what a canopy and what a tent is. I have definitions around those. I don't know if you just want me to send those to you, or do you want me to read those off to you? You're muted.
Darn it. You can read them out for the board, but if you could email them to me, because I'm typing, but I'm not that quick.
Okay,
I mean,
so a
I'm pretty quick,
definition,
but not that quick.
a definition of a canopy would be a structure, enclosure, or shelter constructed of fabric or pliable materials supported by any matter except by air or the contents it protects, and is without sidewalls or drops of 75% or more of the perimeter. That is what canopy would be considered. A tent, a structure, enclosure, or shelter with or without sidewalls or drops constructed of fabric or pliable material supported by any matter except by air or the contents it protects. And the reason those definitions I feel are important, because when you review the Fire Code of New York State, Chapter 31, they are referenced in that fire code. So just to set the expectations correct. The others would be around the use of liquid petroleum gas, or LPG, propane, as most people would refer to it as. No container of liquid petroleum gas, either in its use or in storage, will be permitted inside or on the roof or balcony of any occupied building or in any construction attached to occupied building except as permitted by use. You know what? I'm going to send this to you because it gets, and I'll send it to the board because it gets very lengthy and wordy for them to review. And Claudia would like copies.
Is it primarily from chapter 31? So basically what you're referencing is included in there?
Yes,
Just so
and
the board knows if they vote to authorize the drafting of a letter, I want them to know what exactly would be in the letter. So it's language that comes from that portion.
Yes, it would be from that.
Okay.
So basically, to sum it up, it's the key takeaway from that code is that outdoor patio heaters utilizing LPG propane as its fuel source shall not be operated under any tent, canopy, or member structure that is open to the public. These LPG patio heaters shall not be located within 10 feet of exits or combustible materials and shall not be operated on any combustible construction, balconies, or decks attached to occupied structures. So basically, you can't have one of those portable heaters under one of these tents because of the potential, if they malfunction, what could take place under the tent. And then it says that these need to be at least 10 feet away from the tent itself, so that if there is a malfunction, it doesn't catch the tent on
And
fire.
it sounds like they can't be on a deck either.
Right. It did. That could be stricken because it really doesn't refer to what this the intention of the law here is. I think what I'm really trying to capture is that I would like to make sure that those heaters are not used under the tent because there have been incidents in the past where these propane heaters malfunction, and tents tend to be made of a material that is very flammable or highly flammable. And I'd hate to see anybody get injured at an event or a party because of one of these propane heaters being misused or malfunctioning. How about that's better the word I'm trying to get at.
There's one word in the definition of canopy and or tent, the pliable material word that I think it might be too specific, and it might be better if you remove that.
Okay.
Because if it's a rigid material, that could pose, I think, equally the same risk.
I'm okay with that as well, removing the pliable material.
And do you want to go as far as making them flame retardant?
I believe, yes. And I know that is a requirement in other municipalities that the tents do have a flame retardant on them. Kelly is gritting her teeth.
Well, I'm thinking if it complies with the fire code and certain things are permitted under the fire code, which is very stringent as you're reviewing it, are you looking to be more stringent than the fire code on that? And I just don't want it to get to, I'm thinking of like those little pop-up tents that maybe somebody has because it's raining and so you're handing out your table seating cards, now you're getting, you know what I'm saying? It may be broadening it to, I'm not sure it's capturing.
Well,
I
we
think
would
you're
want
already
to,
capturing what you're looking to do, and I just don't want that to cover too much that you're
we
not
would
looking
want to
actually right there.
disallow a pop-up tent because these are supposed to be professional tents and events, not somebody went to Walmart, not that somebody went to Walmart and got a $99 10x10 tent and threw it over,
But
threw
so
it
now
over
you're
a
the
tin.
person that has to like collect tickets at this event and you have to do it at the door and it's raining. Somebody's gonna give you a little pop-up tent
Well,
instead.
maybe we could put size limits.
Okay, now we're getting really crazy. But I'll
No,
put
it's
down
not
whatever you
crazy.
guys want.
I don't think it's getting crazy. It's, when I look at it like, you roll it back, right? If this was a building, an event venue in a building, there are all sorts of requirements that have to be met when you're in a building for life safety. And that's all I'm concerned about here is the
Yeah.
life safety of the people in the building. With this potential law change, you're taking that building and making it an outdoor building. You're making it a temporary structure. So those patrons should be afforded the same protections that patrons with inside a building would be afforded and expect when they go to a venue. So
I completely agree.
Right,
I
and the
meant
risk
crazy, but
assessment,
you want me to come up with what size would be appropriate. That is crazy because I have no
well,
idea.
the risk assessment is different if you have a 10x10 versus a 20x50.
Well, do you want me just to put in that it has to have the flame retardant? I mean, that's what you initially said, and
I
I
think,
don't
Would
know
you-
if that's something that could just be even, if you had a
Well-
Walmart tent, could you just spray it on if need be?
How would you measure? Because like usually you would have to get like a UL rating to test things and all that kind of stuff. Do they even make that kind of?
I
how do
don't
you-
know. I don't know.
they do make tents that do have a fire rating to them. That they will with direct flame impingement, they will withstand direct flame impingement for X amount of time. Not that it won't eventually go on fire, but it's not that like you took a match and put it right up against the side of the tent, it goes whoosh. Like it's it's the concept behind sheetrock, Evan, right? Eventually you can burn through sheetrock if the fire gets hot enough and long enough, but it affords you that a little bit of a buffer zone there. So that's why I'm saying that not only will they have to meet the section of New York State Chapter 31, but they have to be inspected prior to the event taking place, so that our building inspector, so if the event's on a Saturday, they go there on a Friday, they walk the site, they make sure the tents are all correct, there's no propane heaters, there's not a 50-pound propane cylinder sitting in the middle of the venue. It wouldn't even be like a 65-pounder.
Like do a dance around it, right?
Right.
Dance around
I
it.
mean, that's cool too, right? And that's all, and again, that's all I'm getting at. I know it seems very restringent and rigid, but listen, you have all these things you have to meet when you have 200 people sitting in a building in a catering hall. There's no reason why people sitting under a tent should be afforded any less protection when they're at an event as well. That's all. That's the only thing I'm trying to get at. I know I'm not trying to make it seem like it's going to be an impossible task. I did look and do a little bit of reading before, and so
Yeah, no, I think you're requiring them to comply with the law.
right.
Straightforward. So
And then that
I don't have a
inspection
problem with
prior,
that.
I don't either, right? And that's
Yeah,
why I
and-
think that inspection prior to the event is crucial.
Yeah,
That someone
and
goes and
flame
checks.
resistance, not the same as flame proof.
Right. Again, we're just trying to make sure, my concern, Mike, is that, again, someone doesn't drop a match, someone doesn't do something stupid, and all of a sudden we have a front page news article on our hand.
Or one of those fireworks lands in the wrong place.
Well, part of actually, believe it or not, Mike, part of New York State Chapter 31 bans any pyrotechnics inside a tent. So they couldn't use like those
No,
flames.
I'm worried about the one outside the tent landing on the tent.
Well, that's true too. So, but that is a good point, Mike, because we do have an event venue here that allows for fireworks and often does them when they have parties, right?
Like last night.
Trying to keep everything general.
Well, that's good. So I don't know which one you're talking about. I don't want to know, but
Well, that's
I
what I'm
will
just-
put that fireworks should be addressed.
yes, I personally, if you're gonna be me, if it's an outdoor, if it's gonna be for outdoor, then fireworks should be prohibited. I see
I
one
have a,
shade.
I have a naive question. Do people actually put propane heaters underneath tents?
You know, there wouldn't be a law if it didn't happen.
No.
Why does it say caution, coffee is hot on a McDonald's coffee cup, right?
Hey, that woman made a lot of money.
I'm not trying to make light of a situation, but like, what does all this stuff come from, right?
There's actually more to that story, but yeah. People don't want to get wet when it rains, and they want to be warm when it's cold. So yeah.
Wear a jacket or a sweater and a scarf. I don't know. Sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Natalie.
All right, I did have some comments on the law, and some of them I think are just, you know, really minor language suggestions. So I will go through them like we typically do each, and then you can decide if you want to include that in your recommendation to the board. So we noticed that the proposed law references an amendment providing regulations for golf courses and accessory recreational uses. We believe that should have read providing regulations for event venues. You know, again, that's just wordsmithing really. So is that okay? I don't know. I mean, sometimes you guys talk about it after each one, or how do you want me to just go through them all? What do you think?
Go
No,
through
let's
'em.
just hit each one and let's do feedback for each one, or else I think we're gonna get
Right.
lost in the weeds.
Okay. So number one, disposition.
Yeah.
Okay. The second one in the introductory paragraph, we just noted that the special permit is defined as temporary. And we kind of later on in the law recognized that that was because of, you know, the contingency on the property ownership that would essentially nullify that special permit if the property was sold or transferred. So it's really just more of an informational thing, you know, for the board to consider. At first, I wasn't sure if temporary should be in there, but then I realized, you know, that's why essentially.
Mm.
So the third part, section A, we recommended you consider whether the size of the lot should be subject to the net lot area deductions. And then we recommended revisions to the text that would point to that definition essentially. You know, so that's something that the board can consider.
Hold on.
Going back to the temporary, would it be better just to ask for annual renewal?
That's
Okay.
not what the Board of Trustees was looking for.
No, they don't
Okay.
want it to, like normally a special permit runs with the land. They want this to run with the ownership of the land.
Okay. Fine.
That's what they're looking to do. If I heard them correctly.
That's correct. Like I said, it's similar to how certain other special permits are handled in the village. And that's how they want this one to be handled.
Okay.
But do we want to have in there that it can be well, no. See,
Because
you
there
might
really
bring up-
wouldn't be an option to renew. They would have to come back and you would reevaluate a new application, basically.
Yeah, but okay, so with most special permits, right, they come in, they're subject to yearly renewal.
Yep.
Or if enough complaints are received by the building department to warrant them coming back to the planning board because for whatever reason, the conditions of the special permit are being abused or not followed correctly.
Yeah, so I
So-
think that it would follow the same procedure, and maybe I could clarify that a little bit in the law. It would follow the same procedure where if enough complaints are received, they'd have to come back to you for modifications to address those complaints, but the special permit itself would not be revoked once granted, I guess, unless there's such issues with it that cannot be rectified by coming to you and then making modifications.
Right, I just want to make sure we don't lose that to claw those back in case there are issues.
Let me think about how to word that, but I understand what you mean.
Okay, sorry, Natalie and Mike.
That's okay. I think you guys jumped ahead to maybe another one of the comments that I had, but my last one was about the lot area. So whether or not this type of special permit should be subject to lot area deductions. And typically that's wetlands or steep slopes and et cetera.
I read that and it got me thinking, right? Do we want tents to be able to be set up in the buffer zones or next to wetlands? I got
Well,
the eyebrows from Kelly.
Well, I think that that would invoke some other laws. The net
Right.
lot area really also assists with the developable area. So what area can you put those tents in? But the minimum lot area for the entire project, I mean, I don't think that that's, well, it's up to the board, but
No, okay. I get where you're going. I think my brain is just not working right now.
well,
Sorry.
we were all psyched up for the last application. It went super well.
I'd be honest with you, I'm gonna say I was expecting to still be talking about that right now.
I had like so many notes ready to nothing.
I don't think the deduction should count in this. Like, for example, I'm thinking like if you have a very scenic hilly site that's terrain, part of the reason it is something that people want to go to is because it is a scenic place. And that might, if they're off by, I don't know, a few hundred square feet or something, that might cause issues.
I can
That's
get,
what my
I
brain
can
was
see your
trying
point.
to say. Well,
Yeah,
worded.
you also don't want them to cut down trees to pitch a tent.
All right. Did we
Nay.
actually answer that?
So I think no on the lot area deductions. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
The next one, and I have a feeling I already know where this answer is going, but we, just noted that the event venues would only be permitted in the R1A zone. But we recommend you consider whether or not it should be the R3A zone, which would then by reference open event and venues to properties in the other residential zones, including the LC and CR that meet that 25-acre threshold. So there are, a number. I think I did a quick search on like the GIS and there's like 100 properties that are greater than 25 acres in Woodbury, but a lot of those properties are eliminated ultimately because they are recreational or designated as parkland. And when you look at really all of those properties that are in the R1A zone that meet that threshold, there is, essentially maybe a couple handfuls or less. So that was just why I offered that for consideration.
Considered. Next.
Okay. We asked, or we recommended the last section or section C, the last sentence, include input from the village traffic engineer. I think right now it reads engineer, ESOs, etc. Good.
Sorry.
That's
Sorry.
okay.
Silence in my world means accepted usually.
All right, sounds good.
Or confusion.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing there. It could be either or, and everybody might be thinking something different. So section G, we recommended that you consider with input from the building department whether or not there should be language regarding when the the Department of Health or liquor permits would be required, for example, prior to CO.
So they should have any permits they required prior to that inspection by the building department, right? So
Which would probably correspond essentially with that. Well, they're going to inspect it during building permit, but then obviously before the CO would be issued as well. So.
right, you would want them. I would want them to have everything in place before the building department issues a CO.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
Okay. The next one, we recommended examples of appropriate buffers in section H. So buffers may include landscaping, fencing, wall, sound barrier, or other means found acceptable to the planning board for the purpose of mitigating noise and or lighting impacts.
And fireworks.
So I guess, in some ways, it gives you a lot of discretion, but also provides examples to potential applicants for what you might be looking for.
I say leave it just for the discretion, right? Because it's one of those things that the planning board will have the ability to either require or not require based on the application in front of us. I like discretion.
Yeah. So do you like the language with the suggested alternatives or just altogether take the sentence out?
Oh, I don't know.
All right,
What do you think?
everybody that wants the sentence added, go like this. Everybody that doesn't, go like this.
Okay.
All right, I got down. Sorry, Natalie.
No, it's fine. This is just suggestions. You guys, it's your, the way you guys want to proceed. We also talk about the temporary tents or fabric structures. We recommended you consider an appropriate limitation to the length of time that could be considered temporary. So we suggested 3 days prior and post the event for which they are temporarily constructed. That was an example.
Have we defined what the event is or the duration of the event?
No, that hasn't been defined, but I would just be a little bit cautious about that one because if somebody does put up like the similar tent for a season, and I'm thinking of like West Hills, maybe this is a bad example. I don't always give great examples, but West Hills has a sort of outdoor cloth temporary.
There's the
tent.
Renaissance Fair. Think of that one in Tuxedo.
I haven't been to that.
Yeah,
But
I know what you're talking. Yeah, but that's
and it stays up for like, and I think that the building code actually has a limitation of 6 months on temporary tents being up.
Okay, so it's already sort of defined by the building code then.
Yeah.
Essentially.
well. I have a question then. So is the CO they're getting for the season? The
No,
temporary,
they
or
would
is it?
get the CO for the use. Generally, they would get a CO to be an event venue. However, for each like tent that they put up, that would need the inspections based on your prior comment. So they
Right,
don't get a
but
new CO for each event.
I was basing my prior comment on that the tent would come down after the event and go back up for the next event, so that the inspection process would be ongoing and continuous. Now, if you take this with your example, I'm not saying if they put the tent up in March and it stays up till October, then it only gets inspected once in March. They get their operating CO
Mhm.
and they're off to the races. Now, the events can change, right?
Yeah, and some people need a tent, some people don't need a tent. Sometimes that tent is down, and I point because it's that way from where I am.
But how do we capture that? So if the tent is taken down and then the next tent goes up,
Then it
that-
should be re-inspected based on the language that you asked for.
well, we just got to make sure that gap's captured. I don't want, saying that, once the tent is up, that's it. The inspector's never going to go back out there again until next year.
Well, I guess once it would be the tent goes up, it's inspected. It stays up until it's required to come down.
Right, but
Can,
They
can
put
we,
up a next tent, then they would be back out inspecting
But
it.
can
see,
we
they put the-
impose a periodic reinspection?
well, because this is what I worry about, right? Is you put the tent up in the beginning of the season, and then it's set up for a wedding, then it's set up for a bar mitzvah, then it's set up for a baby shower. Now, the aisles inside are going to, part of the inspection of that tent is to make sure aisle space, exit pathways are clear, so people can get out. If you just do the one inspection and the inside, the use is changing, aisleways are changing, dance floors are changing, portable stages are changing. How are we ensuring that an exit's not getting blocked? An aisleway is still being maintained?
You would have to tie it to each event. Essentially, like a list of events would have to be provided, on a monthly basis or something like that to the building department. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, well, and the tent itself is exposed to rain, sunshine, temperature extremes,
Get struck by lightning, physical damage.
wind. Yeah, can we
But
put a periodic reinspection into this?
yeah, because, what happens if there's a windstorm and it gets loosened up and then all of a sudden a strong gust comes by and it collapses the tent? Well, they're going to say, well, the building inspector inspected it 6 months ago, it was fine.
Yeah, or a hailstorm, which is more severe.
Right, because you're not dealing with permanent structures that are designed for rough elements. and that have fixed emergency exits. Tents can be changed. This stuff can all become very fluid. I can get a caterer that comes in and puts, or a DJ that comes in and puts a 30-piece band in front of one of the exits all of a sudden. And again, I'm talking from what I've seen in the field from doing this before. When tents are used as entertainment venues, they change. You know, the Renaissance Fair is a good example, but those tents are pretty much static. It's the turkey wing tent, the archery tent. You know, those uses don't change. This is an outdoor catering event hall. Ooh, I got Kelly thinking now.
No, I mean, I've been to many events at West Hills. The inside does always change, but it's a tent and usually it's got sides that roll up. But I can certainly put in something that the board is looking for a periodic reinspection of a tent if it's up longer than a week, something like that, and see what the Board of Trustees says.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We recommended section JB include a discussion on provisions for loading areas for event spaces. Silence, I don't know, is that?
What do you mean by loading area? Like where the trucks?
Yeah,
come
where
in?
there's gonna be deliveries and essentially staging for the same,
Okay.
you know, typically like for, you know, obviously you guys know, because I bring it up every time there's a hotel, is there's, you know, certain dimensions for loading areas that would be required or a designated space, you know, within the code even it's specified, but,
So what, you don't want people driving over the front lawn to deliver everything?
Well,
to you
we don't
guys,
want them out on the public street unloading.
that too.
Yeah, I think that maybe that could also be, I don't have J, I'm switching back and forth. Thinking, oh, J is application. Okay, I was thinking it might also be related to parking under E with staging area, because, you know, if you have a caterer come, they bring one of those trucks, whatever, that may be something you want in a different location so that all the guests coming up don't see it, or something like that. Someplace where it's easy to take the tables and chairs off the back of a truck. So maybe I can,
Yeah, so
I would think
Jay,
that the board would want some flexibility in how to, no, Chris likes flexibility. on
No,
where
but
the things
there
should be
has to be a
located.
provision that they have to provide for. Like, they
Right.
just can't say, we're gonna use the front of the house and park the trucks in front of the house and roll everything across the front lawn.
so, but Jay also, in addition to application, talks about an event management plan and then goes on to indicate what that plan and narrative would include. And that's what I'm suggesting, is that it include a discussion on what a loading area, where a loading area would be and what that would consist of essentially. for
So it'd
that
be almost in
event
their
venue.
narrative, right? Like, they'd have to come in and say, this is how we're gonna handle deliveries, this is how we're gonna handle waste, gray water,
Right.
black water, and all that other.
Okay.
I think we have provisions around that in our public assembly law, that they have to come up with a plan for management of trash, wastewater.
I
all
wrote that
all
a really long time ago. You think I remember? I'll take your word for it. No, I think that's good. I was just taking notes. Sorry. That makes sense. Okay.
Then JE, we also recommended, you know, some more specific language on the water and sanitary facilities and discussed, you know, what that should be based on maximum occupancy, and then a discussion on if it wasn't on municipal water and sewer, proof that the capacity and good working status of the facilities to serve the site with water and sewer, including any appropriate testing as required by the planning board and its consultants.
Now, a lot of these places have those fancy
The-
porta potties brought in. How does that work with this sentence? Is there a way?
Can we add that they have to provide their license, or whoever, like, you know, if
Yeah.
it's,
Do they license that? I have no idea.
yeah,
they
they're
do.
licensed, by the
There
DEC.
was some guy who was dropping him off by the Brooklyn Bridge and they told him to leave because he wasn't licensed.
Oh,
No, the DEC regulates those companies. So you actually have to have a special permit. It's actually a special endorsement you have to have on your commercial license to drive that stuff around.
Yeah, so I guess my comment would be really more for like a permanent structure or a permanent space, and what you guys are describing is more of a temporary facility. So, you know, maybe there's an opportunity to include both.
Well, isn't the whole idea, intent behind this is that this is not permanent, this is a temporary, because it's outdoors, right?
Is it only outdoors?
I mean, if they wanted to put any permanent structures in, they would need to go through the regular permitting and review process.
So seating, it says seating for events may occur outdoors under a tent or other fabric structure temporarily constructed on the property or in a permanent principal or accessory building. So the event could be inside a West Hills. It could be inside West Hills or in the tent next to it. So I think what Natalie's saying is if it was in the building and then I was adding on, if somebody wanted it outdoors, what I've seen recently are these really fancy porta potties. So I just wanted to know how it works, but
Well, how do you capture that then, right? Because if the building itself is rated for 100 people and they put a tent that holds 1,000 people, we've got to make sure they have adequate facilities.
Well, then
Right.
it's the language is adequate facilities.
yeah.
I mean, if we go back to the Rushmore example, they were overloading their existing facilities.
Yeah, let's not use that example.
Yeah,
Okay.
just trying to keep everything general, trying to talk in generalities.
All right.
But
But
West
sometimes
Hills,
an
we'll
example
use
gives
West Hills as
clarity.
an example. But no, I think that's if the board wants to include Natalie's JE, then I would also suggest the language about the adequate facilities that Mike was just saying, and also licenses required for the
For any
porta potties.
temporary.
Yeah, appropriate DEC licenses.
Yeah, I agree with JE with Michael's add-on and then the requirements for providing proof to the satisfaction of the village consultants of, the licensed waste hauler.
Is the adequate facilities based on plumbing code?
Oh, good point, Mr. Evan.
I
So,
deferred to
yeah.
Mike and Natalie, Mike Pinella, sorry, Mike Pinella and Natalie.
Well, I think it's adequate facility, like the intention of including that language is that it has to be adequate to serve the proposed event venue based on the occupancy that is suggested. And then proof that the facilities have the capacity to meet the occupancy that is being proposed essentially. That's how I
Right, but
kind of look at that.
But isn't that, to Evan's point, that's defined in the plumbing code? Don't they have a chart that based on, like if it's
Occupancy.
5 square feet of standing space versus a seat? I think they determine the occupancy and that's how they determine how much.
Like the
How many-
number of bathrooms and stuff
Yes.
is what you're suggesting? Okay, yes.
Fixture count, yeah.
Sure. So that's definitely a consideration that I think would, fall to Mike typically, for like an internal review of a space. But what I was suggesting is thinking on more of a permanent basis, that their well, septic or other is sufficient to support the proposed use.
Right, but we also have to make sure on a temporary basis
Oh,
too,
yeah.
that they have an adequate base, I'm sure people have gone to events where there's not enough bathrooms.
No, I definitely agree. Mhm.
As a female, I can definitely agree.
I mean, for guys, trees are good.
Yeah, there's always a line.
Well,
Um,
as long as it's not in the riparian zone or the water quality protection overlay, because then you're gonna be.
Please,
then-
no, I don't want to have to do an enforcement action against that.
Um,
Sorry.
Going back a little bit, we were talking about propane heaters under the tents.
Yeah.
What about other utilities, like if there's a generator and there's refrigeration units or freezers inside? Do we need to address that? I mean, the generators would be covered by the noise ordinance.
Well, the generator is going to be covered by New York State Fire Code too. They're not allowed under the tent on the New York State Fire Code. Electrical, I mean, it's either a hot box, it's just got a couple of, it's either plugged in or it's got a couple of those little canisters that go in the bottom of it. Refrigerators and freezers typically are electric. They don't usually propose a huge hazard that I've seen. But we're also requiring part of the New York State code, and that we're gonna write into our code is the requirement for fire extinguisher and stuff under the tent as well. So, I mean, they gotta be able to cook, right? And store their food somewhere. So I don't know if we want to listen, I'm all for life safety. I don't know if that goes maybe just a little bit. You know, you can't have a refrigerator or freezer under the tent. Generators, completely agree with you. How was the wedding? I don't know. We're recovering from carbon monoxide poisoning. I mean,
So
He just-
I think that by saying that they comply with the fire code, I think that would be sufficient in that regard.
Okay,
and that's where that inspection, like recycle, comes into play here too.
Okay. My
Natalie,
next,
we're on KB.
my-
Keep
yes,
it
at
going.
KB, so.
We haven't gotten to Phil yet, by the way.
I know, I gotta be quick. For criteria for approval, Part K, the facilities available, I just kind of expanded that, including but not limited to water, sewer, drainage, and refuse collection. I don't think that commits the planning board to anything, but just, indicates what, certain considerations that you would be looking for. Is that okay?
Yeah, again, I mean, part of this law should say they should submit a narrative of how it's going to work,
Mhm.
and that stuff should all be addressed
Right.
in that.
The next one, KH, we just recommended that the end of the sentence include general public and the environment, and we were just kind of thinking of any environmental sensitivities that could exist on the proposed area of where this event venue might take place.
Like peeing in the riparian zone.
You never know. Yeah, there it is. Enforcement though comes an issue, for.
You guys are killing me. You're killing me. I don't want to have to enforce something like that.
You never thought this would come up when the water quality protection overlay went in, did you, Kelly?
I never thought I'd be talking about it when I was in law school.
I think there actually there is part of the water quality protection overlay discusses like feces within the riparian zone, like deposition of like your pet's feces and things like that.
Yep.
It does, and
that.
phosphates. So
Yeah.
So I've already had to talk about it once. Let's try not to do it again.
Section L, we recommended the board consider whether or not there should be a definition as to who would be responsible for restoring the site to the original condition, the current or prospective owner, and then if the ambiguity places the onus on both parties. So, and then
No.
just to, okay,
I was gonna say it should be on whoever owns the property before they
sell it.
sell it. Has to put it back to where it was or what it was.
Likely it would end up on the new owner. For example, if an owner passes away.
Well, then would it be the estate?
Okay, they don't have any kids. Goes to probate.
You're killing me. You're killing me, Kelly. Now,
I mean, look, when somebody's selling a property, they're not going to be like, hang on, guys, let me tear this down. They're going to try and sell it and say, hey, I've got an event venue.
Well,
And then
yeah.
it comes to the village and the village is like, tut tut, you didn't read the law. So that, I mean, from a practical standpoint, that's how
but
it plays out.
from a practical standpoint, when you take a mother-daughter and you sell a mother-daughter, you have to remove the second kitchen before you can sell the
And I
property.
think we've got 3 pending applications before the ZBA for people who just didn't read that.
So is that
Well,
an enforcement issue or?
They're not using them. I'll say that, allegedly.
I don't feel that, I mean, I get in I guess practicality or practice what will happen. I just don't think that's fair that if I'm buying a property that I'm have to fit the bill to put it back to the way it was before the other owner.
But
made
there's
all
no
these-
way to go back after the property owner once they sell it, unless you have
Okay.
a restoration bond. Now, a restoration bond in this instance, I wouldn't recommend.
Okay,
That it just doesn't make much sense to make somebody tear down a building that a new property owner may say, wait, don't tear it down. I was gonna use that as a barn. Or it's late. I'm really not good with examples.
No, I
That's it.
get, okay, no, I understand where you're
Yeah.
going, though. I'm just thinking as a potential buyer, like, well, it sucks that I gotta spend all this money to fix it.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I was thinking too, but I understand Kelly's point. So it sounds like it just has to stay ambiguous then.
I think so.
But the other reason that I suggested it too is kind of leading into my second point, which you guys already discussed a little bit before, is whether or not the new owner, if they're also obligated to then restore the site back to its original condition, should have like a grace period to apply for an event venue. You know, like say I buy a property, then I have 6 months to restore it back to its original condition or apply to the planning board and get my own special permit.
That's a good suggestion. I like the grace period.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, what do we do? I think, what do we do with, what is it now with special, like pre-exist? Like, if it's a restaurant and it stops being used as a restaurant, there's a certain period of time they have to continue the use.
Well,
And
that's
then it go-
12 months before it's abandoned, so I would think I'd have to think about it, but I would put in any recommendation to the Board of Trustees if the board wanted something about a grace period to restore the property unless and until, you know, another special permit for this use is applied for and received, something like that. Diligently pursued, stuff like that.
And is there any way to put language in there that it can't be used while this process, the re-permitting process is
In
going on?
progress. Right.
Well, technically it's already at
It
that
would be
point
a
once the,
violation.
right, yeah.
Okay,
But maybe it might be good to spell that out even for,
Right.
Yeah, make it explicit.
yeah, I just could see, oh, look, I got this great thing in my backyard, let me use it, then I'll go get my permits. Like,
Mhm.
not that that's ever happened. Everybody's very law abiding.
So I'll move on then to the next one.
Sure.
Okay. So the last sentence of that paragraph, we suggested it be changed from single family status to use, just because I think there are a couple other permitted, permitted and special permit uses in the R1A zone, and that gives discretion if somebody has a property that's 25 acres in the R1A zone and it's not necessarily a single family and they want to have an event venue, etc. Maybe that makes sense.
in that case, I'd probably take out original and say prior permitted use. Only because I don't want somebody to say, well, the original use of this property was a hotel in the 1880s.
Sure. Right.
True.
See, I said it's late. My examples get worse as the night goes.
Yeah, but it made sense.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
That's so nice.
The next one is we recommended you consider a section of the law that would allow the planning board to require any upgrades or site on or off improvements necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the general public and the environment. That gives you that just lots of discretion there.
Right, so if like an intersection upgrade is needed, or, oh, look, Kelly's doing the thing again.
Off-site improvements, to require off-site improvements, that's like, that one's not gonna pass muster. If you can tie it back to seeker, like Phil was talking about earlier, actually, to tie it back to seeker, then you're allowed to either have them do that or reduce a project in scope so that improvement is not necessary. But to come in and have somebody have this in there and then, you know, a whole different board be in place and that board say, you know what, this event venue's going in down by Palea, that direction. But I think that a light is needed down by Woodbury Common. It's like, no, it's a drastic example. But
Okay, but what about not so drastic? I have a gravel pothole filled road that's 16 feet wide, 12 feet wide, leading to my event venue. And I have a 52-ton tanker that I have to get there for fire protection.
then I'd go up to the access section and say that you're requiring them to have two means of ingress and egress because of X, Y, and Z, that's insufficient for emergency vehicles. So either work with whoever owns the road to make those improvements, or scale back your facility whereby you don't require a fire truck, you just need a car with a bucket of water.
Right, but do we want to then have something there so that, trying to think, I want to make sure
You're
wherever
gonna
this
be
goes,
able to allow improvements to build a road up to a standard. But the way this is, it's requiring off-site improvements such as a street light or some other off-site improvement that you're not gonna win on.
I just want to make sure you, if you use like the example, like it goes up by Palea, that's not paved and it's gravel road, that the Woodbury Fire Department is going to be able to get their tanker truck from the firehouse up to the
Mhm.
front door of the venue and not worry about it getting stuck in the mud, or it's not plowed, or it's falls off a ravine because the road is only 9.5 feet, wide.
Yeah,
Like,
so then in that case, in order to have the appropriate access, they can either upgrade that or not have the use that they want. But you can't require them to do it, but you could deny it on grounds that they may not have appropriate access.
and who defines that appropriate access? Phil? You?
Well, it
Natalie?
would be in that, it would be Phil, the board,
Emergency
Natalie, and
services.
the ESOs.
Okay. So we don't need
Not
to,
me.
do we need to spell it out that ESO has say here?
Yeah, I think it is.
It's in the section under access. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, all right. Sorry, yes. I have too many Post-it notes and scribbles.
So then without off-site improvements, is this still too general, Kelly, or do you think that, this provides the planning board with some discretion and is,
I think in their general plenary powers, you do have the ability to require certain upgrades or improvements to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the general public, because when you're reviewing this, you're considering that this is going to be for use by the general public. They're inviting these people on there. And like Chris said, they have an expectation to be protected at the same level that you would think going into Cosmos. So you're going to be reviewing, the board's going to be reviewing it under those same standards and guidelines. So under their powers, they, I think, would still have the ability without this language in there.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna clip mark this section of the meeting for when it comes back up.
well, that's what I was kind of thinking is like, for instance, every event venue or even the event in particular might be slightly different, and maybe there's something that comes up that's specific to one that's not really captured in, A through F of the narrative plan that, is spelled out now. So what I was just kind of hoping to do is provide some language that would allow the planning board to think, above and beyond what was already specified, I think, or apply improvements or suggest improvements, to make that run more seamlessly with whatever that specific event venue might be. I
Some
guess.
kind of catch-all.
Yeah. But, maybe it doesn't work.
No, I mean, look, it might, and I may not be making the connection right now. So if the board wants to include that, I mean, I'm right now not just thinking about the comment, but thinking about how it fits in and how it's going to apply going forward, and then apply if it's challenged. So
Can you add it in
not
and then
going
sleep
on
on
up
it?
here. So if the board thinks it sounds good, I might just be on a different step, trying to think it all the way down.
Well, can you add it in and sleep on it and then,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I would do that for all that you want in there, because then at some point I would try and put together a red line version for the Board of Trustees and have to flush out some of these issues. Anyway, but for some reason I'm trying to flush them out in my head right now.
I know, and it's late, it's a lot to try to digest and think about right now for everybody.
No, and there's been a lot of good discussion on this, so it's like trying to get it all in there would be good.
Um,
How do you think Claudia feels? I keep hearing the pencil tips breaking over by her.
She's like, oh my God, Kelly, stop talking. Let them finish.
I'm sure she's saying that about me at this point. I'm sure of it. So I'll just wrap up my last comments quick. It's just about architectural review, you know, whether that would be required for permanent structures in this instance, or even maybe, you know, the more I thought about that actually is it already captured, you know, in other parts of the law, you know, under special permit being automatically, you know, considered for ARB. So Kelly, you can think on that one too, if the board wants to discuss that. And then the last one was exemptions for signage. And then I kind of discussed how the R1A zone special permit uses are allowed to have wall signs no greater than a certain area, and freestanding signs or a freestanding sign that is 15 square feet. So then other signs such as banners, canopies, windows, portable signs, and murals would not be permitted. So whether or not there should be any exemptions or discretion for the planning board, that wouldn't require an applicant necessarily to go back to the ZBA for the same.
So do you think that you or the board would be recommending changes to the sign section? More than just, I think it's a really good point, because you drive by some of these places and either their signs are gigantic or their signs are so small you pass it 3 times before you find it to pull in. So do you think that what's in there now would be sufficient? Or do you think that it needs to be increased or decreased? Or what does the board think? Or does the board not care right now?
No, I think signage is a big part, right? You know, do you want them putting up a huge marquee on the side of the road, or do you just want to have a, you know, quaint little, you know, Chris's wedding venue, turn right 500 feet? I think with the spirit of the law and the intention of the law, that we're trying to keep these quaint and, you know, nice and compact and fit into the rural community and character, that I definitely would want to expand the allowing larger signs. I think we should keep with what's allowed within the R1A. Yeah, I think we should. I don't know.
Well,
Okay,
maybe
then it
just-
might be what Natalie is saying. Maybe
Yeah.
I should put a section in, or maybe I should recommend a section based on this, kind of just making sure it's clear that for this zone and this use were to be approved, this is the signage that we would be permitted.
Yeah, just make an explicit cross-reference
Yeah.
so that people
Yeah,
don't have to look in different places. When they're looking at this stuff, they just look at one. But going back to the ARB, I think some of it would be duration of it, how long the tent is up.
Well, would you want a
Okay.
purple tent? I think maybe with kind of what Natalie's getting at, right? They're gonna
But
put a
if
tent up.
if a purple tent's up for 2 days, it's different than if it's up for 6 months.
It is. But how do we
Well,
rein that in?
yeah, that kind of goes back to the earlier comment about what is temporary. You know, what would the planning board consider temporary? You know, if it's 6 months and it's permanent, then, you know, 6 months might be considered permanent, then you would look at the ARB for that structure. But if it was only going to be up for a week and it was going to had to be taken down 3 days before or 3 days after, then, you know, it might not be something that you were completely, you know, concerned about, or overly concerned about, I should say.
Yeah, because if it's just for a week, you might want to make it more festive and not a permanent eyesore, just something that stands out.
Yeah, I get where you're going, and I agree with you, Mike, that, you know, a short period of duration looking at a rainbow tent is great. Having to stare at it for the next 3 or 4 or 5 months, it may get a little tiring after a while, especially if it's in the dead of winter and there's no foliage on the trees, and all you see is this big pointed tent.
Right.
Yeah. And then
Or
I guess
canopy.
Yeah,
the other
canopy.
thing is, you know, when you approve the event venue as a special permit, you know, the event menu, the person who's applying for that special permit might not really be considering, you know, 4th of July, you know, 6 months later. You know what I mean? So they might not be thinking like, oh, I'm gonna want, you know, a red and blue tent at that time. You know, so again, that kind of comes back to, whether or not there's these reoccurring inspections or reoccurring, situations, I guess, aside from the annual renewal, that you would want to capture, I guess.
Well,
Unless
then,
you, yeah,
Well, is the duration part of the initial approval?
it's through till the property is sold, I think. So then, maybe the modification to the law is defining, what would be an acceptable temporary structure, like, no flamboyant colors or, for more than 6 days or something like that. I don't know. Just spitballing a little bit, but
well, then wouldn't Ridge Pres come into play too then, depending on where the property is located? Because if they're in a Ridge Preservation Zone, then don't they have to comply with Ridge Pres? So they wouldn't they would,
Yes,
You know,
so they
we-
would say, look, we intend to put up a tent likely at some point. It would be located in this location. And the board would ask for photo sims or whatever you need, and then you could put restrictions on that and say, okay, if it's gonna be there, it can only be ivory. Something like that. I say ivory because that's the one I usually see at wedding venues, but I think red and blue sounds very festive for July.
don't
I
know
just
the
never
July
seen
is the
it.
first thing that came to mind. Not
I've
Christmas,
seen like
which is right around the
the
corner.
little
but-
pop-up ones, but
well,
that are red and
Kelly's
blue. But I've
back to
never-
our Walmart pop-up tents.
those things, my neighbor has one up right now. It's like, things
And
gonna
it
blow
annoys
away.
you, right? Because you've been looking at it for how long?
Oh, just today. He put it up yesterday, but it doesn't annoy me. I'm just like, it's gonna blow away.
Well, that too. All right, so let's circle. Do we need to define a time period for what is temporary here? Because you're right, our code does have temporary, but I think it's a longer period of time than,
Yeah, temporary until the wind takes it down.
Well, they have to be held up if you're doing a structure like that. There's certain ways that it's permitted to be constructed. Especially for something like a wedding venue, which I only know because I just had a wedding venue in another jurisdiction. And the poles were erected improperly with the straps, so they weren't permitted to continue until all of that was fixed. So it's
and
gonna,
that goes back to my requiring inspections more than
right, and so they
once.
had to, they had to inspect it. Well, it was more of a permanent temporary structure, but it is a temporary structure and it's only permitted for, I think it's 6 months, but somebody can check the building code on that.
Trying to search
Um,
it now, but there's so
right.
many temporaries.
Yeah, I just hit this,
No.
I hit the same roadblock too. There's like
Yeah.
2 pages of temporaries.
Yeah, so.
I think I know this. Hold on.
Are we okay with considering a tent temporary for 6 months? I guess that would it or whatever. Okay, so let's say it's 6 months. Is this board okay considering a tent temporary for 6 months? Silence means yes.
No, in this case, it means I'm thinking.
Okay, so the new building code local law that was adopted, Chris, this may help you. Section, now I gotta scroll up and I might lose it. Section 96-10F.
Hold on, this is 9 of 22. Local law
Adopted,
9 of,
yes, I think so, the
okay.
building code. So the duration of operating permits shall be issued for a specified period of time consistent with local conditions, but in no event to exceed as follows. 30 days for tents, special event structures, and other membrane structures. So they would have to either come down or be re-inspected for your operating permit. So maybe specific reference to this section would be helpful. And also, if
think-
they want to have a sugar house, that's only 60 days.
A sugar house?
Yeah.
A house made of sugar?
My
No,
gosh.
it's where you do the maple syrup.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Okay.
Chris, you really didn't know what it was? I was like, yeah, obviously, Mike.
It's late. I'm sorry.
But let me put that down. So reference.
Chris doesn't know what a sugar house is. Sure, make sure you put that in.
Let me just write that down. Chris doesn't know. F 30 days. for
I'm not gonna live that one down.
that may actually address, so it used to be 6 months, and then I think the board had the ability to choose certain timeframes under the new regulations. And for this one, they chose the 30 days.
I think that's fair, because then at least we know once a month they're getting re-inspected and reevaluated.
So that actually might, and I wish I thought of that earlier, I'm sorry, but that might address a lot of the comments that you had earlier
Yeah,
as
it
well.
fits in.
Cool.
Evan's like, you couldn't have done that like an hour ago, Kelly.
So
Now you hear
We're
the,
gonna
now you hear
talk
the,
about sugar
now
houses.
Claudia's got the whiteout out. Oh my God, I go back and take this all out.
Yeah, that whiteout really messes up the screen.
Yeah.
I am
With
going to
pencil.
fast forward.
Oh, sorry, getting punchy.
So then I think it's ARB would be exempt for temporary structures, but only required necessarily for the permanent is what.
Right, it
that
wouldn't
one
exempt
comment
them
would
from
be.
any of the current review.
And
Right,
I
but you
made
might
a-
still want to look at it and like say what Natalie said, no crazy colors or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, they'll still have to come in with a narrative and a plan, and it's
Yeah.
not just gonna be, here, go ahead, have a tent and have a wedding.
Yeah. So if the board is okay with everything discussed, does anybody have any other further comments?
You forgot
I-
Mr.
I-
Phil.
yeah,
Mr. Phil.
I
Oh
wanna
my
go
gosh,
back-
I'm sorry, Phil.
I'll be very quick, very
Okay.
brief.
I see your hand up, Mike. Hold on. Go ahead,
So-
Dr. Phil.
Natalie already captured us under item C, access. So under the application section, so under J, sub-item B, there's a reference to provisions for traffic and parking management. What I was recommending was to expand on what's expected to be included in that, not just leave it open. So, for example, that it would have a narrative and, possibly some plans of how they would actually maintain traffic, how they would maintain and manage parking. Would they be using valet services? So I think it would be good to add that. That's item 1 in our memo. So I think
Yeah.
that gives some parameters to have the applicant cover.
I
Under
concur.
section K, which is criteria for approval under sub-item C, it talks about availability and capacity of streets and highways and other means of transportation to and from the site. I think we want that to be looked at for both existing and future conditions. And the reason is, there may be some item, for example, like a site distance issue under existing conditions. And this kind of goes back to the planning board's ability to ask for off-site improvements. If there's the method of getting, or the path of getting to and from the venue has a location that has some control, such as site distance, the board would have the ability to get them to improve that. It's not like putting in a traffic light, or if there's an intersection that would show that there's a capacity issue, they may have to have temporary traffic control. A lot of municipalities require the applicants to hire off-duty police to handle that type of situation. So I think it's important to kind of give more direction to the applicant to make sure they cover these.
Yeah, I agree with what Phil is saying. We want them, how they're getting in, how they're getting out, where they're parking the cars, how they're getting the people from the cars that are parked to the venue, where the delivery trucks are all going, where the service trucks are gonna go. I think this, Phil is right, this needs to be thought out, and a comprehensive plan needs to be provided to the board, just like we would with the permanent facility, right? We don't want the neighbors
Maybe
calling
do
and
it-
say,
a traffic study as well.
I mean, I think that should be a discretion. I don't think it should be mandatory
No, not
Right.
mandatory, but as needed.
as needed. Yeah.
As needed, correct. And the only other comment was under that same criteria for approval, item K sub item D is where it talks about the orderly movement of traffic within the event and contiguous to the event area. That I think it should just reference back to the parking and traffic management that's in item B above that. Because they're the same, you know, basically saying the same thing.
Cool.
That's it.
Thank you. I agree with, sorry, Mike, I know I cut you off before when Phil started talking.
No, that's
What was-
fine. What I was gonna say is, I had made an offhand comment before that we don't want people clear cutting the trees just to have an event. We need to have some kind of control on that too.
Well, that would be during the site plan review process, because they're gonna have to come up with a map of where they're gonna put these tents and the parking and, or am I wrong? Like, because they're still subject to that. They're still gonna have to provide where all that stuff is going. So this board doesn't lose any of its powers. There, we can still say, no, you're not clearing out 100 acres of land to put a
Absolutely.
parking lot.
But I know that cutting down trees to put up a house is different than cutting down trees to put up a tent.
Yeah, so we just look at it with a different lens, right? When we're doing our review, if they're coming to us and saying, you know, we're gonna put 3 permanent structures here, and then we want to put a tent in the middle of the forest, you know, maybe they got to cut a pathway, but that's about it.
Yeah, you look at it from your environmental and your planning standpoints.
Yeah, we still don't lose, we won't lose any of our ongoing powers right now, or
Right.
current powers. Not like we're superheroes, but
I see your cape flapping in the background.
it's my side job, my side hustle. Any else from the board have any other feedback or comments they'd like Kelly to, because I don't think she has enough to try to get together before tomorrow night at 7:30.
Right. So I would just need a motion to authorize a letter consistent with tonight's discussion.
I'll
I'll
second
offer the
it.
motion. All right, Evan made the motion. I'll second. I'll second it.
Okay,
Any questions?
no,
All in favor?
aye,
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody else want to hang around and talk for a little while? It's, you know, we got 8 minutes to 10 o'clock.
Ooh.
Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Was a long meeting. Believe it or not, I actually expected the prior application to take the chunk of time, not this application, but this is what happens when you make an agenda. You just never know where it's gonna
It was
where it's gonna
great.
go.
This was really good discussion from a planning attorney. I mean, this was a really good discussion.
I'll send you, and Kelly, and Claudia, I'll send you over the
Thank you.
time I have as well.
Okay, okay, great, thank you.
So with no further business before the board, I'll offer a motion to close.
second,
Second by Michael. Anybody want to stay? No. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night,
Good
all.
night, everybody.
Have a good
Bye.
night.
Holidays.
Have a good night.
Take care.
Bye.
Okay.